Good morning. Thanks for attending our session on connected TV advertising. I'm Michelle Abraham. I'm a senior market research analyst with S&P Global Market Intelligence. I'm part of Kagan, which is the telecommunications and media segment, and I look at a number of different streaming and advertising technology markets, providing total available markets and things like that. So I'm going to let my esteemed panel introduce themselves and tell you a bit about their sort of how they fit into this connected TV advertising market.
Thank you. Just confirming that the mics work. Do you guys hear me okay? Cool. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Youssef. I head the ad platform at Roku. The goal of the ad platform is to help publishers and advertisers transact on our platform and be able to basically buy ad inventory and monetize their ad inventory efficiently.
Great. Hi, I'm Sarah Foss. I do strategic initiatives for FreeWheel. FreeWheel actually is unifying linear and digital video into a marketplace, but we're an underlying technology platform company that serves not only media companies, but also the advertisers and the agencies, which is the primary market segment that I work with right now.
Hello, my name is Jason Bowles. I work for Nielsen in a newly created team called Advanced Advertising. We are creating a platform to enable live, linear, dynamic ad insertion.
Hi, I'm Dan Hahn. I head up the partnership and agency activation at AdCloud TV. We're software that helps brands and clients make better decisions on their media investment, and that's across data-driven linear, CTV, as well as household addressable.
We wanted to start today kind of a bit of setting the scene. Actually, Hulu's presentation this morning kind of did a bit of that when it mentioned that their viewing hours were up by 75% over last year, which of course gives them many more opportunities to serve advertisements. And we're seeing that happen in connected TV in general. So we wanted to start with a few of the definitions, just so people would understand what it is that some of the terms that are used in the industry. I'm not sure everybody would be familiar. So connected TV, or CTV, and I've been in this industry long enough, the first time I saw that, I thought of color television and was like, okay, why are we talking about color at this point? But connected TV advertising is in-stream advertising within a video stream that is viewed on a TV set. So that can be coming into the TV set via the TV set itself, a set-top box, a streaming media player, game console, or other similar device. In general, OTT for OTT advertising is a much broader topic in that it's video streaming that is transmit over the unmanaged internet, and in that case, viewing devices, usually besides TVs, also include phones, tablets, PCs. We also may talk about addressable advertising, which is reaching people with advertising on a personal or a household level basis, depending on the device. Both OTT advertising as well as connected TV advertising may be addressable, depending on how it is being bought and sold. And lastly, another term you hear in the industry is programmatic advertising, which is really the automated and data-enhanced buying and selling of advertising. So I wanted to ask the panelists, these were 4 basic definitions, whether there's anything else any other terms you think that we should define before we get started. I think, Jason, you had brought up ACR at one point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's always thrown around in this industry is ACR. It's automatic content recognition. That's utilizing any type of technology to try to determine what's being viewed on the TV. For example, Nielsen, with its standard meters, we use watermarking. Watermarking is where we put energy in audio, and then we use a meter to find that audio to determine what you're watching. There's other methods of that, as in audio fingerprinting. You guys all remember Shazam? Try to hear what song that's playing. That's looking at the signature of a particular piece of audio and then comparing it to a database to determine what's being played there. And then on smart TVs, you generally have video picture matching or pixel matching, where you take a signature or a picture of that video and you compare that to a database. In all of those methods, ACR is used in general just to determine what the individual viewer is actually viewing at a particular time.
Okay. First question I have for our panelists is, what are some of the advantages in connected TV advertising as opposed to traditional TV and digital video?
I can start on that. In general, I think when people talk about connected TV advertising, they might think of digital advertising. In part, that's true. The main benefits, to just put it like super simply, is that the digital advertising benefits apply to connected TV or OTT advertising. Namely accurate targeting, flexibility to do one-to-one targeting against individuals or households, the ability to automate things, the execution of campaigns, the ability to be very flexible in understanding the performance of the different campaigns. There's a variety of models, and like linear TV, where you just like bombard everyone with ads and hope for the best and maybe compute the results at the end of the campaign. With digital connected TV advertising, you have almost quasi-real-time results and performance results of your campaign. And that opens the door to obviously a broad array of capabilities and business models behind it. So you don't have to just do, for example, branding campaigns. You can do performance campaigns, etc.
And I would add to that, those are all the benefits, I think, for not only a media company who has that inventory to be able to aggregate that and then differentiate their inventory, but from an advertiser standpoint, it's also where there are some really fundamental shifts in which consumer bases and markets are actually accessing our content via those devices almost exclusively. Right? Mm-hmm. So from an advertiser's perspective, you really do have to now look at trying to find different market segments based on platforms and devices, which is a fundamental shift from what we used to do by just trying to reach audiences through the programming itself.
And I also think too, with some of the data that's available that you get, pulling off of some of these digital platforms, and even some of the viewing from live linear, it allows you to kind of change what you're delivering. For example, I know that we've all watched VOD where the same commercial played over and over and over. Once we get all of the data from all of these devices, it enables us to do other products like frequency capping, right? So I know exactly how many ads were delivered to that person across devices, to be able to make sure that when we target that person, we're not targeting them 100 times and they're so sick of that brand because they've seen it on every single device all day long.
I think 100 frequency is great. Why not? No, but it's TV and digital. It's the best of both worlds. You get the accountability of digital and you get the lean back experience of television. And then to your point about audiences, is that CTV right now is critical to any media plan, especially if you buy heavy TV, because the younger audience they are just not watching standard television. They're watching it when they want to watch, how they want to watch it, on the device they want to watch it. And CTV is such a big part of it with cord cutters and nevers that it is critical to be part of any media mix.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Hulu is one example of a platform, and Roku another, and some of the platforms that are offering opportunities for connected TV advertising. Where else are you seeing opportunities to advertise on connected TV?
I think everyone should only pay attention to Roku, actually.
I think what we see is a lot of people are trying to actually share their inventory or sell their inventory, which is actually creating a lot of complexity for advertisers who are trying to reach those demographics. Because not only are there aggregation platforms like a Roku, you also have some of the folks that are actually selling direct, CBS with their OTT apps. That's another good example of one where you could buy directly from them. Or some of the set-top or the CTV manufacturers themselves, Samsung, Vizio, they're actually now looking and trying to represent the inventory across all of the different native digital apps that are actually physically on their devices, right? So if you are an agency trying to get to those younger audiences or trying to find people on the go, whatever it might be, it's really complicated to go try and find all of the different ways that you can reach those people because there isn't a common set of sales channels yet. It's still a very new one, which is why I think there are folks like Roku who aggregate and then actually say, this is a simpler way of doing it. And what we're trying to see now is how many of the publishers themselves want to actually take that back and own it themselves and go straight to the holding companies and the advertisers.
You mentioned, sorry, Jason, one second. You mentioned the word aggregation twice. That's not what we do at all.
I know. I know.
So we're an actual, first of all, hardware company. We sell products, etc., and then we provide the platform to publishers so that they can monetize their inventory on our platform. So, like you mentioned, an NBC, you should know that, on Roku does not have any economics with Roku. They sell their inventory directly to agencies. So obviously our role is to provide them with these channels that you mentioned so that they can reach to the agencies and be able to have capabilities, for example, Nielsen native integration. If NBC wants to sell their inventory in an addressable fashion and make it measurable, they can do that natively just by building their app on Roku, and automatically the agency will be able, for example, to measure thanks to Nielsen metrics.
Yeah, when we talk about what is available out there, I mean, it's just growing leaps and bounds. I think the metrics I have in front of me from February of 2015, we had 16% of the households that had enabled smart TVs, and now February of 2019, we have 45%. And total households with a device that's internet capable of delivering this content is 71%. So 71% of households in the United States have a device capable of streaming into their household. So, as these platforms get fully enabled throughout the United States through different platforms, there is just an amazing amount of advertising space available in the industry. Things have to change, measurement has to change. Some of these things have to come together. Some things need to consolidate. There are challenges ahead of us, but there is a lot of potential in that space.
Yeah, video advertising is probably the most complex it's ever been. With all these different access points, an explosion of different content everywhere, and different ways to reach it. Like ESPN, you could probably find 18 different ways to access ESPN. And there's no mechanism to buy one unit and have it spread across all 18 different ways. And that's where software comes in. That's where platforms like Adobe can really help. Combination of data plus our device graph, we can try to find audiences wherever they are, wherever they're watching, how they want to watch.
Well, and so just to tag on to that, I think the FreeWheel definition of addressability is not only delivering to that device, but it's also the ability to measure it, right? Because that's where, again, we need the advertiser or the agency to feel like they do have some verification of what happened. And as we've discussed, there are lots of amazing data sources that make it a much more robust and rich advertising experience when it goes back to that advertiser of how that consumer interacted. So the measurement piece is part of the complexity, but also I think the thing that's going to unlock it as quickly as possible.
Okay. Have you seen in what's been done so far in connected TV advertising where there's certain types of advertisers that, I think of the direct to consumer that have kind of gotten started on the internet, are they more likely to be advertisers to take advantage of connected TV, or is it broader than that?
I think in our case, for at least the inventory that Roku owns and sells, I think we are too early in understanding how the trends are. I don't believe there's like one specific sector or vertical that is, attracted in connected TV or OTT more than others. Definitely, you mentioned DTC. There's a trend like recently. I don't know if you guys saw the IAB studies around that. There's definitely an interest. But in the grand scheme of things, if, to give you an example, for example, we sell our inventory to 2/3 of the top 200 agencies and advertisers based on Ad Age ranking. So we almost work with everyone.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to CTV, everyone needs to be looking at it. But DTC is very attractive. Most of them need some sort of accountability. You know, a lot of these DTC advertisers aren't in the business of buying a $5 million schedule and crossing their fingers in TV. They want the accountability of what CTV can bring. But, you know, I have a TV background, and this up front is going to be really interesting. I just looked at a Nielsen run, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but on 18 to 49 adults, of the top 90 cable networks, 70% were down, and 55 of those 70 were down double digits. So you're going to be going into an upfront this year with money probably flat to slightly up, and you're going to have supply way down. And with those headwinds coming at you, you're either going to suck it up and pay a double-digit CPM increase, or you're going to shift money. And the best place to shift money is CTV. So that is a big mass problem, not a specific DTC problem. So I'm sure there are tons of advertisers, holding companies, and brands already planning to make this shift.
We have more than half that are actually buying linear television, so traditional, and digital video at the same time on a campaign, right? And what they're telling us is over the next 2 years, they do want to even shift more of their campaigns to be this more holistic view of not just traditional television and CTV or OTT video. It's, I want video in any platform to be purchased and managed as one campaign.
And that's even, you know, with measurement, we try to look at it holistically too. We have total audience where we measure live linear viewing on your TV, on your standard TV over the air. We then measure everywhere that those live linear programs go out. So on connected TV, you still have CBS that's playing live linear with the same commercial load as they did on their over-the-air broadcast. So as Nielsen, we have to look at everywhere that you might be possibly viewing any type of content, figure out how to measure it, then bring it all together under one umbrella so that it is a total view of what an individual is viewing, no matter where they view it.
I would add maybe a couple of anecdotes on that. So I agree with you guys in terms of like the shift, obviously, on to CTV and OTT platforms. On Roku, for example, 55% I think of our consumers are cord cutters. They don't have cable box or traditional, you know, TV streaming, over-the-air, streaming. And then the second point that I think it's relevant to the discussion, as you mentioned, if you still, definitely there's a trend, as you mentioned, the upfronts, that people are shifting money towards platforms like ours. That said, if you were to compare the budgets to the amount of hours spent by end users watching TV, you will see still a huge discrepancy between linear and OTT platforms. To put it like maybe in simpler terms, say for example, on linear TV today, people are watching 100 hours and maybe there's $1 million in ads spent against those people. On OTT, maybe there's like, I don't know, 10% of that, but the budgets are almost like maybe 1%. So they don't equate in terms of shift. So definitely probably this year, next year, you'll continue to see the shift, but probably it's going to grow also in terms of speed.
And just to kind of round out some of those metrics too, in January, total viewing hours for live linear was 36 billion. And for OTT content, it was 9.5 billion total hours. So you have, you know, the shift is moving, right? But you still have a huge chunk that's still going to live linear. You know, when we look at total population of the US, not just people that are affluent, you know, we're looking at the entire population of the US, you know, there's 20% of them that are cord cutters, or you know, completely cut the cord. They have either getting their content over antenna or broadband, you know, no cable subscription, no anything. So there is shifts all over the place. That number has grown drastically. I mean, it used to be 8-10%, you know, years ago. And now when people are getting rid of their MVPDs, and buying smart TVs, they're doing both. They still want some of their live content, and they'll use antennas or other things to get it. Even the younger ages, 18 to 34s, are increasing drastically on viewing of live linear on connected devices. So you get that cord-cutting effect, plus people are shifting the way that they view. I think when you buy a TV, you look at everything that's available to you. What content is available to me in what I've now purchased? And doing searches on all types of platforms. And if it doesn't meet your needs, if you're not getting your sports, you're not getting your other things, you tend to go and buy an antenna or other services to be able to get the content that you desire.
Okay. So if I'm a provider of a streaming service who has ad inventory, how are they connecting with buyers at this point in time?
It's hard. It is really hard. And that's probably why, from an advertiser or agency view, there are providers of marketplaces. FreeWheel has a marketplace. We have partners that our agencies also can automate with, right? Folks like Simplify, and it gets back to the easier way for an agency or an advertiser to buy is knowing the audience that he or she wants to get to, but having someone be able to bring a lot of that versus go find all of the different publishers and create a campaign from the ground up. And between the measurement across all of the different publishers being slightly nuanced different, between the fact that lots of people have OTT inventory, some of which is outstanding but still might not be completely validated with how much you can actually get to that audience and the metrics back. It has created such complexity for the agency or the advertiser to go direct that's probably why I completely offended Roku by saying aggregation, because they like being able to know that there are places that I can actually get to lots of different types of programming and do so like I do right now by going to a traditional media company, and I can get lots of different types of inventory or work directly with a partner that I know exactly what verification I'm going to get back. So I think that complexity has created a real challenge for the advertisers, and so it feels still more like we're experimenting as we try and go marry all of these different publishers together and in essence stitch together a holistic campaign.
Yeah, at Adobe, a lot of advertisers come to us and ask for recommendations on CTV. Mm-hmm. And it's not just one thing, it's a combination of using exchanges. Then there's a whole premium on-demand panel that we have, pre-negotiated rates with a lot of the big brands that you would see on TV, whether it be like a Discovery and ESPN. And then you have private marketplaces. And you need to take all three into account. Mm-hmm. But where it gets difficult is if you're not one of the premium publishers that are out there and you're still small, a lot of it falls on that you hope your audience pops on an exchange, that you're priced fairly. It is really difficult. If you don't have scale, it's a tough go right now. It's a lot of meetings with agencies, but at the end of the day, if they're buying you on an audience, your value proposition may fall short. If they're buying you contextually, if you're a small sports network, maybe it could pop on a couple of different campaigns, but it all comes down to scale at this point.
So maybe if we can take one step back, you mentioned like how to reach to the buyers. First of all, who are the buyers? I think there are two main categories. You have the traditional TV inventory buyers. These are like like Dan used to sell to these guys a while ago. So these folks obviously want a replica of what they have seen on traditional linear TV on OTT platforms. The way to reach out to these guys, most of them go through the big holding company and agencies, and the best way to reach out to them is basically meet with them and try to convince them that connected TV inventory is exactly the same, if not better than what they used to use, right? And one of the main, I would say, value points or like convincing points that we use is, for example, Nielsen. Hey, you used to Nielsen metrics on linear TV, you have it it on Roku platform. It's a native integration. So it's the same metrics, apples to apples, okay? And that's where actually the bulk of the money is. And then you have the video buyers who are experimenting with connected TV. So they want to expand, maybe try it out. It's cleaner, doesn't have fraud, it's full screen TV, etc. That's a much smaller budget. Still, the bulk of the inventory is owned by large publishers and MVPDs. So the small publishers, unfortunately, like Dan mentioned, kind of are not, don't have it like easy today. And the way for those publishers to reach out to the buyers is usually through platforms like Adobe, through aggregators, because again, you mentioned, agencies want the easy way to execute at scale, right? They don't want to be like calling on every publisher and buying 10 impressions here and 100 impressions there. So that's where I think the value of platforms like FreeWheel, Adobe comes into play and allows the agencies to execute their campaigns efficiently.
So you certainly mentioned the complexity of matching the advertisers with the inventory out there because there are so many different sources of inventory, and each one would be very difficult to negotiate with each one separately. What other areas of friction are we seeing in connected TV advertising at this point in time?
Well, I think unified measurement always comes up.
Number one.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the pleasures of working with Roku is they offer a Nielsen DAR rating. A lot of TV money that shifts to connected TV. Those TV buyers still want the comfort of kind of comparing to a Nielsen number. But not everyone does that. In fact, just you and Hulu, to my knowledge, is the only ones that do that. Frequency capping, as mentioned before, is a huge issue. And then transparency into schedules is another thing. Again, as all of this money hopefully starts to shift from TV to CTV, again, there's going to have to be a point where agencies can't expect that they're going to get a great list of schedules of all your programming. Here's where it's running. You're still buying an audience. You're not buying programming at that point. And I think there has to just be kind of a meeting of the minds between the two.
I think that's a really key point, though, Dan, which is it's not just the measurement of the new platforms. It's the fact that we are fundamentally selling something different, which is now an audience that can have very rich data sets, which is different than what we've been doing for quite some time, which are broad demographics and programming, right? And so agency systems are also making this shift to be able to now buy, not with the thought in mind of, I need to get to this program, right? The DIY set of programs that's going to be on network X, but who really are the people that watch that, and enable media companies to connect the dots between that advertiser who wants to reach that audience and think differently about reaching the audience across platforms and different types of programs. Right, so that is another area of friction. People want to buy audience, and then when you try and do that automatically as an agency or an advertiser, you don't. That's really challenging. And so that's another thing that FreeWheel has been trying to solve, is how do you automate the audience buying system? And it helps that NBCU and Comcast Spotlight are part of the broader Comcast family. And so we do have a way to look at audience now inherently with some of the owned and operated properties and expose that into an agency system that can then automate that process. Right now, we've been automating spots and dots, right? So that's another big shift that I think is happening, but not as fast as I think the consumers are moving over to actually watching CTV as robustly as they are.
And a lot of friction, I think, also is in the technology platform. For years I've been working with the consumer electronics companies, trying to get measurement on smart TVs to cover the base of it. I've worked with every single platform here at this table, every other platform you can think about. My prior job years ago was implementing measurement on anything and everything we could. some companies build their technology with the knowledge of measurement, with the knowledge of advertising. Roku did a very good job of that. Some companies do not. So when you have a platform that's enabled for something and then you try to adjust it to fit something else, measurement doesn't always fit into place, right? Data coming off of it doesn't always give you the right information. So, we've tried to measure anything and everything. It just always isn't as easy as just saying, oh, just measure it, right? It's almost a different solution for every single platform because there's so many different intricacies around that particular development of that one platform. So there's a lot of friction there. If everybody had the mindset of, let me, monetize data, measure my platform, and here's what I need to do to make that happen, it would have gone a lot smoother. But we had, quite a shift in transformation, and really, it was drastically fast. Right? I mean, it changed drastically over the last 5 years, and people are scrambling to build things to get everything moving. So now we're all trying to piece everything together.
And that's created a vacuum of some of the standards in terms of even delivery mechanism, right? So there are a lot of other industry initiatives that are now trying to say, okay, not only do we need standard measurement and metrics, but we also need ways that we can all distribute equally, so that if we say it's an addressable ad, we know that downstream we can expect certain things to happen from it at the connected TV. But from an infrastructure standpoint, as a provider or even an agency that's creating the creative ad that's going to go to all these platforms, we know that if we produce it as X with such metadata, that we can also have a very automated process all the way through and guarantee that it gets to the right place at the right time, and we can get the attribution, the verification, and measure it on the way back. So I think that's another thing where we're starting to approach standardization in different ways, since it's evolved, I think, quickly without that in mind.
One last point on that. Sorry. I think you started the question with challenges and frictions. I see way more opportunities than the challenges and the frictions. For example, Sarah mentioned the point about audience. Definitely, that's a huge opportunity and the shift. At Roku, obviously, most of our work is audience-based. We try to promote that as much as possible. We have a sales team. I love to call them actually educators rather than salespeople, because honestly, they spent like the last 3-4 years just educating agencies on the points that Sarah mentioned, like why it's important to reach a specific audience rather than buy a specific show or try to target a demo post-campaign. And fortunately, the good news is people started to understand that, started to buy that way. To give you an idea, like I think a few years ago, we participated in one upfront, and now we participate in all agencies upfront, and there's a huge interest in buying that fashion.
Okay. Sarah had mentioned standards in terms of standardizing ways of measuring and passing data back and forth. What standards are there in the industry right now, and who's setting those standards?
Well, Jason. Jason personally is doing everything.
Well, no, I don't mean just the measurement standards. I'm talking about, standards in all across the ecosystem, and how the ads are delivered, how the ads are inserted, how measurement is only really a piece of that, but there's a lot of parts to getting an ad into a video stream.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, from a platform perspective, obviously at Roku, we work with all of the different companies involved in the execution and delivery of the impression. I would say a lot of these standards are kind of taken from digital video standards, so nothing new in terms of like vast execution or ad serving or programmatic advertising, etc. Like many of these things are like mimicking basically digital video advertising. We do participate with a different organization like the IAB, ANA, you name it, and just like evolving those standards to better fit maybe the demands of buyers and sellers of connected TV inventory. For example, supply chain authentication or catering to additional metadata that Sarah mentioned about, like about the show and time of day when people saw that. But in general, I don't think there's like a main entity out there that is like dictating everything. I'd love to think it's Roku, but definitely we're much more collaborative than that.
I want to pick up on the word collaboration because I think you're right. I think some of the standards now are actually not technical so much as they are even business process. What we as an industry, how does it become easier to buy audience? How do we remove some of that friction so that, frankly, traditional media companies who are moving into CTV or even those native digital publishers can represent digital video as a premium inventory source. And so FreeWheel is one of the founding members of Project OR, Open Addressable Ready. That's really trying to address some of the business process changes of offering to advertisers and making sure that if you say something's addressable, it has certain parameters. You know, as an advertiser or agency, that you're going to be able to assume certain types of measurement, certain types of ways of buying audience to make it, again, simpler for the advertiser or the agency to say, aha, I get it. And if the industry is coming in saying, we are making a transition into addressable, these are the fundamentals I can expect to have to show that I'm achieving the results I need to as a campaign.
It'll be interesting to see with the technology development. You know, placing ads on TV were simple for a long period of time. Now, when anybody can create a platform, anybody can create a way to deliver content, things are constantly changing. How is content going to be delivered in 5 years? I don't know. I mean, it's changed so drastically already. So, you know, can we keep up with some of those standards? Obviously, measuring all of this is extremely difficult with all these different platforms and fragmentations. So if we see fragmentations of just the companies that are able to deliver this type of addressable advertising, how can we get everybody following the same type of path for measurement, for technology, for data, all of these things? I think it's going to be quite difficult. It's going to be herding cats for a little while.
I agree. And you know, every time that someone's testing something, whether it be Project or OpenAP 2.0, in another year, there's going to be another advancement that leaves that a little bit behind, and then they have to pivot a little bit. And then with us, you know, a lot of our deals, you know, we say they're all like snowflakes. They're all different. If you're using first-party data, there is no common measurement. You're using that specific data for that specific client to reach that audience. And there's no way to measure that specifically. So, you know, I do think there's just a lot of learning. And then, you know, what happens if you listen to the Verizon folks, you know, everything's going to be addressable in 5 years. So it's just a really tough time to have a unified measurement standard at this point.
Okay. So what's being done to automate the process of buying and selling advertising? Kind of going back to, you know, programmatic, as was one of the definitions that we had up there. Because it seems that the only way to remove at least that point of friction that comes with having so many options as far as sources of supply is going to be being able to do so automatically, because you can't put people involved and you don't get the return on investment if you have to have a person for every platform.
Well, I think too, you know, people have been doing it a certain way for a long time in live linear. If you just remove the Band-Aid and do programmatic or some other automated fashion, I think it's hard for people to transition. So I think in this near term, you know, when we're creating our addressable platform, we're trying to figure out exactly how people do their jobs today in a live linear world and a TV world, and how to convert that over to an addressable advertising on a connected TV. How do you bridge that gap and do it in a way that makes people comfortable, that can easily relate their new job to their old job and not just flop from one to another? So in my point of view, it's trying to figure out how to get this industry to transition in a timely manner. You just can't flip them over the edge, you know, day one.
Of course not, because it's billions of dollars, right? And so one of the things that we've done at FreeWheel, because we do have buy-side platforms and sell-side platforms, and we work with multiple marketplaces, not just our own, is we basically automated the pre-buy and the campaign negotiation process, right? That's a starting point, because what it does is it removes a lot of the phone calls and the emails to multiple different sources that are going to come into what we call that omni-platform campaign, which is what people want to buy. They want to have access across multiple platforms in one campaign. And today, there is no way to automate that without something like what we've done at FreeWheel called linear automation. It is the transition of how do you buy, audience connecting to multiple buying sources, and automate it versus have it be a one-to-one. Because Michelle, what you said, which is there's no ROI if you have to keep adding people, spot on, but unfortunately, that's what a lot of the agencies and advertisers have had to do, whether it's through the digital video side, as you've mentioned, or they add a new team called programmatic that does nothing but try and figure out how do you buy from as many of the programmatic engines as possible, or they try and add it from the linear side and say, hey, the world is changing, just do more with your current job.
And a lot of times those budgets sit on one side versus the other. TV's over here and digital's over here, and they're fighting for the same.
Okay. Just wondering, there's been a lot as far as connected TV advertising discussion in the US, and just wondered in your experience whether you're seeing similar things happen in other parts of the world, or not yet, or kind of where do you see things with, clients and sources of inventory outside the US?
I think from hardware perspective, we are present in more than 20 countries in the world. From monetization perspective, it's kind of slightly different for various reasons. In order to be able to have a successful equation like the one we have in the US, you have to have three elements, basically. Good penetration in terms of the hardware. Number two, you have to have content. People would not buy the hardware if the content is not there, both AVOD and SVOD. Number three, the monetization for the AVOD folks, as well as actually subscription-based kind of platforms. To create that, it's quite difficult and takes a lot of time and energy. Add to that the complexities of the local markets, the scale of the local markets. Not every country obviously is as big as the US. Definitely the viewing behaviors kind of tend to be aligned with the US, meaning all of the stuff that we talked about in terms of shifting from traditional TV to digital or connected platforms is happening, with the exception of Japan. And then in terms of specifically monetization piece, we spoke a little bit about audience, about how publishers can sell their inventory efficiently through these platforms. There are obviously local laws and regulations that are far more complex than in the US that also make things a little bit slower.
Yeah, from Adobe standpoint, we're a global DSP, and most of the CTV has been digital budgets that are testing in CTV, and there just isn't enough scale when it comes to it. We've done, the most successful we've had is probably Australia and the UK. But even in the UK, there may have been 2 apps just 2 years ago. So there's just not a lot of people doing it. But I think over time, when they see the success in the US and the ability to reach audiences that are younger, that are changing their mindset of how to consume TV, it'll start to grow, but they're way behind us.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it also has to do, again, with technology and control. There's certain countries out there that, there's standards in Europe, the HbbTV standards that you can do dynamic ad insertion and other things. You have cable companies who will control a country, have them, 80% or more in a particular country, and they'll block those signals from going through to the TV. So that only enables the dynamic ad insertion to occur in the set-top box. Depending on what the carriage rights are and other things, they might not want to give them those rights to impact that advertising. So as smart TVs become, more distributed out through those countries and other technologies are available to do those insertions, I think that would allow it to grow as well.
The advertisers want to buy it, right? Because yeah, the consumers are behaving this way. I mean, so regardless of what country you are, consumers are moving, especially those demographics of the millennials and the Gen Y and the Gen Z, right? And so if you want to reach those audiences, you have to figure it out. I think that the two things that have impacted agencies, because global agency holding companies also are really trying to buy more globally, because there's scale, there's benefit to doing so, and then being able to regionalize or customize for the local, which is much cheaper than buying specifically in that one particular market. I think it's not just the tech platforms and the sophistication of the media market, but as you mentioned, the regulatory. The privacy and the security laws in many of the new emerging media markets are so radically different that you can't just pick up and say, this is what we did in the US, or this is what we're doing in Australia, this is what's happening in Korea, and plunk it down in something else without some pretty radical shifts as a media company or an advertiser to prove that there are privacy standards well and above what those other markets do. And so I think that's another hurdle we have to figure out, or those markets have to change.
Right.
Okay. And I wanted to wrap up my last question with a kind of a look towards the future. As far as, you know, all of the friction that was mentioned earlier, looking out a year or two from now, do you think any of that friction will have been erased, or the market in general be simplified? And who do you see having or needing to have an impact in simplifying it?
I think, like Sarah mentioned earlier, I think it's more of a matter of collaboration between the platforms, the various platforms, as well as publishers and agencies, to better explain to buyers how to potentially buy from certain outlets or certain platforms where they can find all of the inventory that they can that they want, as well as like the audiences that they will use to target, and the measurement third-party platforms that they will use to prove basically the efficiency of their campaigns. From our perspective, again, our role is to create the best differentiated platform to make things as simple as possible, as natively integrated as possible. So when you mentioned like reaching out to agencies, be able to provide them with like a platform where all of the inventory is available there, they can pick and choose as they want with just one buy. That's definitely a goal. We will not do it alone. Obviously, we have to work with you, with other platforms to be able to be successful in that.
We absolutely believe that there will be consolidation of marketplaces because agencies and advertisers do want that simplicity. Where those bets are going to be, I think it's pretty easy if you read the trades to see those of us like FreeWheel who are trying to make that big bet. But we do believe also in an open ecosystem, right? Because what FreeWheel is trying to do is different than what some of the holding companies might be doing natively, or different than Roku, or different even than Samsung. So I think there will be consolidation of ways to buy inventory. But the other part of your question of who needs to work on that, we all do, right? We all do. I think every single one of us are here because we have been working towards collaboration and bringing the buy side, especially those holding companies, together in conversation with the media companies and those enabling technologies, whether they be cloud like yours or measurement, so that we can actually monetize it. We have to connect all those dots, and I think that we've started down that path, so I would fully expect us to make progress in 2 years.
And it's funny, the timeline here, right? Because TV advertising has been existing for a long time.
Forever.
And everything was set up and working smoothly because it was simple. And now we're talking about converting everything in a short amount of time. I mean, remember, this is still just an infant ecosystem, and we all at this table have worked extremely hard in solving all these problems, and it's constantly changing. We're constantly chasing something. So by 1 year, I think the friction still exists. I think it even gets worse. But as as this market matures a little bit more, I think we do have the opportunity to kind of rein it in, consolidate some areas that need help, develop new technologies or new methodologies or measurements to go along with that and move us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's two things also. I think leaders in the CTV space have to continue to push with what they could provide. I know Hulu made some announcements at their new front about frequency capping. Roku has a great partnership with Adobe where we're allowed to take our advertisers and match up to the device ID for one-to-device targeting deterministically. These are nice steps in the right direction. And then the other part of it is following the money. Mm-hmm. So if you have a holding company who might spend $10 million with somebody, and there's an opportunity to 2x, 3x that, but you have to make some changes on your end, whether you're a platform or a supplier, that's what's going to give you the impetus to do so.
Okay. Have some time for audience questions. So I don't think there's a mic, so I'll just have to take the time to repeat the question. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I own an agency that is specialized in traditional direct response television advertising for the last 27 years. And we recently licensed a DSP, and and you guys didn't call us back, by the way.
We're blaming Dan.
Zero calls, but I'll give you my card at the end. I want to go back to your original thing where you had these definitions, because I'm trying to get my arms around this. And there's a marketplace, at least on the DSP that I've licensed, which is Basis. And there's open exchanges, and there's private exchanges. And then my decades-long relationships with Viacom and Dish, they're offering me remnant private deals that they will not allow me to put into the DSP. So could you just take a minute to explain what this marketplace looks like for somebody new like me trying to jump in?
So let me see if I can rephrase all that. So in terms of, as the owner of a direct response agency, how to kind of put in place, you have options within a DSP for private exchanges and open exchanges, and you still have sources of remnant inventory elsewhere, and how can you put all that together to simplify it, to make it work for you?
Sorry, what's your name again? What's your name again?
Ron.
So, Ron, so to simplify things, I'll try. It's kind of a little bit complex, and I understand why you ask the question. And trust me, we hear those questions every day, many times, from folks who are like veterans and have been in the industry on both sides, the linear and the programmatic side. So, number one, the direct relationship that you mentioned, that you have with Viacom and Dish and others, you can still expand those and buy the inventory directly through a tag, forget about the DSP for a second, just execute it the old-fashioned way on platforms like Roku or Amazon or Apple. So basically, Dish has a lot of inventory on Roku. They can sell you basically that inventory the same way they sell you the linear TV one. Maybe the same CPM, maybe slightly different, but usually more or less the same. Execution-wise, almost the same. Okay, you don't need a specific kind of technology to do the execution beyond what you had a few months ago. Then, and I would say from platform perspective, that is I cannot state the actual number, but by far the vast majority of the transactions happen that way. Okay, and then the new rapid way of executing is the programmatic, obviously channel. Where the same inventory or sometimes different inventory is available. Okay, so Dish or CBS or whoever might elect to offer their inventory, premium inventory, through programmatic channel, through your DSP or Adobe, Trade Desk, you name it, or might offer a totally different set of inventory for various reasons. Now, on the programmatic side, there are three ways to execute these kind of campaigns, right? One of them is called programmatic guaranteed, where you guarantee to Dish to pay $1 million for X amount of impressions, and they will give you those within the flight. It mimics exactly the direct deal on the tag-based. So I don't know how much programmatic in that execution. To Michelle's point, is still one person calling the other one, and just using that maybe DSP for, reporting or something like that. The second type of execution that you can do through your DSP is called private marketplace deals. So where you can agree with certain publishers to buy from them in a non-guaranteed fashion. You say like, hey, I might spend up to $1 million in this time frame, right? Obviously, CPM will tend to be slightly higher, inventory might be different. Also from the publisher side, obviously they don't guarantee you the inventory, right? So 2 weeks before Christmas, you will not find that inventory. And the third part, which is the exchange, which is open exchange, where we see, mainly it's obviously display advertising and mobile advertising, but connected TV is catching up with that too, at a much slower pace. So if you want to use your DSP to buy inventory from the open exchange, I don't want to speak on behalf of the traditional publishers and MVPDs, but you would not find much inventory there. Right, you will find maybe from smaller publishers, if you will, but the large ones tend to have one-to-one relationship. They want to know you because, again, they don't want to have like some random, advertiser just throwing in ads on like CBS on prime time, right? Hopefully that helps.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. I can't see all of you. Hi. So, Jason, you mentioned there's challenges in terms of measurement, and there's also challenges in terms of campaign fragmentation. So my question is, I know that the industry has gone through a lot of M&A at the top level recently, and I guess I have a few questions. Do you think the biggest challenge is that we don't have consistent audience measurement across property to be able to run campaigns cross-property? Do you think the challenge is that we have different types of advertising technologies being used on all of these different inventories, and therefore today it's impossible unless we replace another ad inventory technology to be more consistent across properties? And then also in terms of measurement and being able to actually understand the audience, do we actually have enough data to have parity with the measurement we get on the website today, or is that also a challenge?
I think it's all a challenge.
I was going to say yes, 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 right?
I think it's all a challenge.
Yeah.
Let's just look at connected TV. So Roku, if you go through a Roku TV, you have a Roku identifier, right? If you look at other OEM platforms, they don't have that. You have to go IP address, you have to go something. Some people have ACR on their TVs to get linear viewing, and then they do OTT viewing. Some are enabled with DAR, digital ad ratings. Some are enabled with digital content ratings. Some are enabled with digital TV ratings. We offer all of the measurement solutions for all of those platforms. The issue now is, previously we would put meters in households, right? So we'd call any number of you guys, put a meter in there, we'd measure everything that you're viewing, all your content. Now we have to work deals with all of these different platforms. Some of these people don't want to be measured. Some of these people think they can measure themselves. Some of these people, there's just a full boat of different thought process within this industry now. You go and talk to a consumer electronics company, what do they know about measurement? Absolutely nothing, right? So when you have a company like Roku that comes up as I'm going to focus on advertising, I'm going to focus on measurement, I'm going to focus on these things and make sure that the platform is robust enough to handle all that, then we get a nice picture and a nice capability in that platform. That doesn't happen on everybody else. They're not, an engineer that's developing this new great system isn't always thinking of those things. So I think it is a learning process. Like he says, he's on the phone every day and his team is on the phone educating people. I do the same exact thing. I'm sure that everybody at this table is constantly trying to educate people in different areas and how their company can make things smoother and easier. And I think that's our biggest challenge, is figuring out how to educate everybody in all these different intricacies. I mean, you're in the business now purchasing, and we still have to explain like how this all works, and it works different on every single platform. So figuring out how to look at an entire landscape and say, okay, I understand how this is and this and this and this, 50 different ways. Everybody has to understand every single one of them. It's super complex.
Well, and then if you're the agency that's actually buying across all of those places and then having to somehow consolidate all of the different ways that people are measuring it and talking about their audience, that has led to a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of interpretation and qualitative representation of what's working within the campaign and what's not. And the exciting thing is we actually have more data about the audience in the CTV space than in the linear TV space. Okay? The problem is we've built an entire industry because, as Jason said, we've been doing this a really freaking long time. So now to have all of that and cram it back into the current ways that we measure successful campaigns for advertisers, that's hard. That's hard. And so I think that that's part of the education, as well as even some of the standardization processes around business practice. And if we could at least say across these 7 different CTV platforms that all have a slightly nuanced way that they represent their audience, what are some foundational things that we could say, at least here's grounding, but then look what I've learned across the other 7 and why these 5 were more effective than the other 2.
Even the Comcast population, right? How many set-top boxes are X1s versus old? We can get data, we can't get data, we can get advertising, dynamic added search, we can't. And all that data coming in, how many set-top boxes are on 24 hours a day versus the new ones that turn off? And how do you normalize all that data? Same with the smart TVs. Is your TV in your room just on all the time? What's the measurement? What's the validity of that? Who was actually delivered an ad? Were they delivered that ad?
Yep.
Was the house, were you going to the bathroom at that time? Piecing all this stuff together is not easy. I think, if people are looking for jobs, I think tell your kids data science is the place to go in the future.
That's true.
Yeah, true.
All right, well, we are out of time. I'm sure the next session wants to get here. Thank you very much for attending and asking some good questions.
Thank you.